All right. Hello and welcome to English 12B. So since this is the first class, I'm going to do a little bit of like our housekeeping-esque sort of stuff, right? I'm going to go over just sort of how the class will work, look at the pacing guide real fast, and then we'll kind of do part of what we're going to do for the class. So hopefully you have taken a look at the pacing guide. I'm not totally sure, but I'm assuming since you're here, you're already signed up for the Google Classroom, which is great. So if you have not already taken a look at, oh, that's not the button I was trying to hit. If you haven't taken a look at the pacing guide yet, please do so. But I'd like to explain sort of like how I want it used. So where it says do this week tutorials and mastery test, because we're meeting on Thursdays and especially like in the afternoon, sort of near the end of my day at least, I want you guys to try and have everything in the do this week done before we come to class. That excludes lesson activities because lesson activities are going to be part of what we go over in the class. So I'll like let you know really specifically if I'm like, hey, you can do this lesson activity on your own kind of thing. But for the most part, just do the tutorial and get that information into your head. So a couple of things can happen. One, we can talk about it. I won't just be like telling you a bunch of information that you've never heard or seen before, or anything like that. The other thing is it's going to allow you to ask questions. So if you are like reading along and you're like, oh, wow, like I have lots of questions about this one specific thing. Let me keep note of the questions that I have. You can do that, and then you can ask them if I don't already answer them in class, because I might. You never know. So that's just sort of what I want you to think about. We are going to talk about the unit activity today, even though that won't really be a focus until like next week. Next week, you should complete it so you can get this unit done by then. And then we'll just go over that last tutorial. But today we're going to talk about the introduction to romanticism and then Byron Shelley and Keats. Transpose some letters there. So that's the pacing guide. I mean, if you look at it, we're done in 8 weeks. So hopefully you have no problems keeping up, but please ask for help if you need it. And not this Friday because I took tomorrow off because I thought my movers were coming tomorrow, hence why this is my background. But my plan is on Fridays, maybe on Mondays, we'll see how it goes for me. I'm just going to leave a Zoom room open. So if you have questions, you can just pop in and ask me. We'll see how it goes, but that's my plan right now. All right, so let's go ahead and close those. Okay. So we're looking at English 12B.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So like you said, the Zoom meeting open. Like I was also thinking like, cause some kids, I'm not speaking for everyone in here. Like some kids like work better if they have like, I don't know what you'd call it, like a study group or like a work like in college where like you're in a room, like you rent a room or something. Like for like you all work together and like you like help each other out. Like would that also be a thing for this or like
Yeah,
for like
totally.
a Zoom meeting?
Yeah, totally. We'll probably end up doing some sort of like group activities, kind of using Google Classroom to facilitate it. If you're, having trouble with something and you post something in Google Classroom and somebody else's, and we can totally have like group sessions. I mean, we're sort of trying this for the first time. So hopefully it'll work out that way. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we can try.
Like what I meant is like of course like you're saying like no, like on our own time, like say like on the weekend or something, like everyone's like, oh, like we want to work or something together. Like I don't know if probably most of the people in here are shy. Like just like, oh, you want to work together or something, like Zoom or something, like help each other out, like if you're stuck on this or this. Like I'm a very helpful person, but I was just gonna ask if we could possibly do that.
Totally. I think you guys could use your Google Hangouts accounts. I don't know if you'd be able to use Zoom. Like I don't really know how it works when you don't have like a pro account. Not super familiar with it.
I
But,
accidentally made the like I think you can make a room or something, like you just have to send the person the link or something, and then they can join.
well,
But
cool. Yeah, you guys could totally do that if you want to. You'll be able to communicate through Google Classroom, so that's definitely an
yeah, I was trying. You said like message you through Google Classroom. I ended up just emailing you, but like I can't figure out how to like message you through Google Classroom.
I might have disabled it, like just up front, but I'm gonna go in and re-enable some stuff. So
Oh, all right. Thank
cool,
you.
no problem. All right, cool. So yes, let me pull up my lesson plan over here. Okay. So we're going to, oh, I haven't explained really what we're doing. So again, kind of back to like talking about doing that stuff beforehand. It's sort of what we call a flipped classroom in the teaching world. So it's this idea that you take care of the like traditional aspect of like, let me be a teacher and lecture you on stuff. Because there's no point in me doing that because the tutorials do that for you. You can have them read aloud, whatever. If I'm going through them and I find that there's something that like we really should dive into more, talk about a concept more, stuff like that, I definitely will do it. We're just not going to do that necessarily this week. I'm just going to really focus on going over the lesson activities in these. Because that's mostly what these tutorials are about, is kind of like breaking that down. So yeah, I suppose we'll get started. Another note too, this is a unit activity unit, but for test units, I will do a test prep with you also in the week that you're like assigned to take the test. So that's something to think about too. And then something that I noticed today, I'm positive it's new, or they have guided notes now included. So if you haven't clicked on this resources option in your tutorials, there are guided notes. So if you're like, wow, I really don't understand this, these might be super useful. I made a whole bunch of them a long time ago, and these look a lot better. So.
Oh, also another. Dang it! I had a question. Oh, like, could you also like go ahead? Like, I saw like the guide, like or like the pace guide. Could we like go ahead, or would we have to wait for you? Like, if we like want to like do more work.
So you're totally allowed to go ahead. Yeah, you can go ahead as much as you want. The most important thing though is just don't fall behind.
Oh yeah, because it like I'll be honest with you, like English not my best subject, so like I'll probably be messaging you a lot, like, oh, I don't know what this is or whatever, but like, yeah,
For sure.
that's it. And also for like Google Hangouts, you'll need the person's email, right?
Yeah. And it's the Jackie Wilding at oflschools.org is me.
Oh, if it's alright with you, like I'll just leave like if anyone else wants it or something, for like, because there's a chat in here, I'll leave my school email or something if they want it, or something if they want to message me, or like,
Yeah,
if that's alright.
I think that's okay. I think that works. I think that you guys have permissions for that. So.
Yeah, because I'm in student council, like I think the student council president gave me her school email, and she was like, if you need anything, just message me.
That's cool. Yeah. I'll probably even have us all do that in the Google Classroom, just so that we can all share that. I don't know if you guys can see all the people. I've never actually.
Yeah, it just says classmates in there.
Okay. I've never actually been a student in a Google Classroom, so I don't know what it looks like.
Oh, all right.
I've always been the teacher, so. All right.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so if you've gone through the tutorial, one of the things that comes up with romantic poetry a lot is God and religion, and death, and just sort of like life. One thing that I do want to stress about romanticism and romantic poetry, though, is that it is not what you think it is. It's not like lovey-dovey. It's not poems about like love and romance and things like that. It's more of a stylistic thing. So that's something that hopefully comes across pretty clearly throughout it. But yeah, it's more of a period of time. So it's a social, historical, and philosophical change. The Industrial Revolution, the French Revolution, and then the Enlightenment were all big parts of it. And it's also a reaction to the negative side of the Industrial Revolution, which sort of took away from like people living more rural lives or living in the country. So that's like part of Romanticism is actually more romanticizing nature and beauty in the natural world versus like love romanticism. So that's just something that I want to make clear, because I remember when I was learning about this, I'm like, oh, how like dumb, I don't want to read a bunch of romantic poems. And it's very different from that. Oops, I don't know. Okay. All right, so there is only one lesson activity, I think, in each tutorial. So this first one asks us to refer back to some poems that came up. Again, this resources folder over here is really helpful. If you've already gone through the tutorial and you're like, oh, I don't want to go back and look for those poems I'm supposed to do, you can just find them right here. That's like a really handy tool to have. So I have the poems pulled up here. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it is long, but that is something that, you know, I would like you guys to read and look over. Obviously, it's going to be a little dense just because of the language, but we're still going to talk about like the answers to the lesson activities. I always just want you to try. I want you to try reading the poems, because you're not going to get better at it and understanding some of this like really hard language if you don't give it those tries. So just read it. If you don't understand all of it, that's okay, but just try. And then you'll also notice that you have these little footnote indicators, and they're over on the side, so you can see that it'll be easier to find. But basically, this whole poem, so first off, it's an elegy. And so that, hold on, I'm going to use a tool that I really like to use. I have a Mac, so it does this. So an elegy is a poem of serious reflection. It's usually something, if you've been to a funeral and you're familiar with the word eulogy, an elegy is usually just a eulogy in poem form. It's like it's about death. That's really like the focus. So an elegy written in a country churchyard. So we already know that we're somewhere in the countryside, right? So already we're dealing with a romantic theme. So some poems about death mention God or religion, but Gray's elegy written in a country churchyard does not. Knowing that this poem is a romantic poem, why might Gray have chosen not to bring formal religion into it? So this also says this should be 3 to 4 paragraphs long. I don't want to say never. I almost never expect you to write that much in your lesson activities. First thing is I don't want you to plagiarize it. So I know a lot of times we see these like long expectations and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want you to put it off either. I don't want you to copy the sample answers. You can definitely look at sample answers, because that's what I'm doing a lot of the times for these, because I'm just like, what? And it's a lot of work. But you should paraphrase things if you find that useful. But again, thinking back to one of the elements of Romanticism, dealing with like the stepping away from the industrial world and being in the church, it is interesting that he doesn't bring religion into the poem. I feel like it's hard without reading it to you.
I have another question, because during this, before school started, my teacher, she gave me I think 12B for some reason. I think I've done this part before, so would that matter if I because I don't know if you get taken it off or like.
If you've already done the unit and you've already received credit for it, you're good.
No, like I don't know if I completed it though, but like I don't know, like if I have to do it again, then like I already know what to do. And
Okay.
also another question is like could you like not like plagiarize like the whole thing, but when you're typing like a sentence or two, like could you like quote something like this, like I got it, like let's put in quotations or something.
Totally. Yep. That's totally fine. If you find something and like you're like, wow, I don't know how to say that any better, you can totally quote it and then just let me know where it comes from and we're good.
Could you like possibly like I don't know how to do it in that, but like like at the end of it, like at the very bottom, just like link or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Totally. All right. Okay. So, really with this poem, I just wish it wasn't so long, only because of the sake of time with all the classes and stuff. Oops. I hit the wrong button. Okay. So the main point is that everybody dies. Death is natural. Death is part of the natural world. It doesn't come to us for anything other than because it's part of life. And so he's really trying to like make it very clear that everybody dies and nothing can stop that. Industry can't stop that. God can't stop that. Religion can't stop that. Everyone's going to die, and that's fine. And he's just sort of like acknowledging that and how it is natural. And that's really why he leaves religion out of it, is because he's not looking to the supernatural. And God and religion focus on that supernatural being because God is not like a human, right? So he's not bringing that up because of that, because it's really just this focus on nature. He's describing nature, he's describing how everything dies. And yeah, so another thing that he does is he brings up a couple of famous people. And the reason why he does this also is because there people like John Milton, he's the author of this really long poem called Paradise Lost. I don't think it comes up in English 12, but I actually think it may have come up in English 10 if you did English 10 with us. But Paradise Lost is like a really famous epic. Cromwell was an English leader. So you have these people whose names that we remember. And then he also goes back, though, to talk about how none of these people would be remembered if it weren't for the people below them. So rich with the spoils of time, did never own role. Like, it's just everything is connected, everything is natural, everything works together. And yeah, what else do I have noted here? He talks a lot about just like the humble villagers, but yeah, in terms of what this first question is really asking, it's mostly just that he is choosing to focus on the natural, and that's really it. I don't know what they expect 3 to 4 paragraphs to come out of that. Okay, next poem is real short. Let me find it. Sorry, they cram a whole bunch on here and it can get a little hard. Okay, so My Heart Leaps Up by William Wordsworth. Hit my thing. Okay, so rephrasing a poem can help you pinpoint its main themes and ideas. Paraphrase My Heart Leaps Up by William Wordsworth in simple everyday language. How does summarizing the poem in this way aid your comprehension of the major themes and central idea? So what that's trying to tell you to do is look at this poem and think about it in what it's very plainly trying to say. So my heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. If we're just doing plain language, like, I am happy when I see a rainbow. Okay. So was it when my life began? So is it now I am a man? So I've always been excited by rainbows from when I was a kid to now when I'm old. So shall it be when I grow old or let me die. I hope that as I get even older, I still enjoy rainbows. The child is the father of man, and I wish my days could be bound to each by natural piety. It's just sort of like, earth is the, I don't know how to words. Child is the father of man. I wish my days would be bound. I just, nature, he's really talking about nature here, is just like, I just want every day to be reminded like about life and nature and that kind of thing. So the theme here really is finding joy in nature, right? Because he's just saying, I love when I see a rainbow in the sky. Well, he's probably talking about a lot more things, but that's a really good example because it's something that everyone can visualize. It's beautiful. Everybody likes rainbows. So that's basically like taking that down, breaking it down. And so summarizing the poem in that way, you can kind of see like, oh, okay, the major theme, the central idea is just finding peace, comfort, beauty, and stuff in nature, because that's what he's doing. That's what he's saying. I'm happy when I see a rainbow. Was when I was little. Now I'm a man. Hopefully when I get old, I'll still feel the same. I wish my days could be bound each to each with natural piety. And then piety is another good word that you may have run into before, but it actually is a word that's specifically tied to religion, like your devoutness, your religiousness. So he's trying to find his religion in nature also. So you can just say a couple of sentences about that for this one. One thing that you might even want to do is just sort of rewrite like the poem if you'd like, just so it kind of helps you when you're answering the rest of that question. I actually am totally cool with you guys skipping writing into this one. I just kind of want to share some of the points about the way that nature is dealt with, and it's mostly that the first poem is really about death, and the Tintern Abbey is more about how nature gives life and is healing and invigorating. So it's sort of like that opposite. In Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard, it's a little bit more about like life getting wasted and ultimately that death. So just sort of interesting. You don't have to do part C. Totally cool with that. Fun part about the PACE classes is I will cut stuff out. Okay, and then this vocabulary exercise is super easy for you to do on your own. You can go to thesaurus.com and be able to answer these questions. You're just looking for these words. Do try and make sure that you have the correct context when you're looking up the synonyms. That is all for that one. I'm excited for some of the later lessons because they're a little bit less dense and we cover some of my favorite authors later on. Okay. So that was early romantic stuff. So that's like late 1700s. So obviously it's a little bit like more, I think. Sorry, I have very specific views on literature, as somebody with a degree in English usually does. All right, so these are probably three of the most famous romantic writers, Byron, Shelley, and Keats. And these are a little bit later on, so their poems are a little bit more developed in terms of like the romantic style. And they added some like other stuff too. It's a little bit more focus on like, there is more focus on the material stuff later on, but it ties it back to like the themes of nature and the world and stuff like that. So for part A, how does the word choice affect the emotional impact of She Walks in Beauty? Pay attention to connotation rather than denotation. So this came up in 12A. So if you're not super sure what connotation versus denotation is, that's okay. I'm here for that. So denotation of a word is its dictionary definition. If you look up a word, that's its denotation. That's just what it is. But words also have connotations to them. And so that's sort of the loaded meaning that we assign to words. So the example I gave earlier is the difference between homeless person and bum. One is, they are a homeless person, and the other is a negative thing to call a homeless person. So the connotation of homeless person is much better than the connotation of bum. You shouldn't call people bums, but you can call them homeless persons because that's what they are. So the denotation has a more positive connotation in that sense. You can also do smelly versus fragrant. Okay, so smelly, we usually think like bad smell, but fragrant usually makes us think of like flowers and stuff. So that's connotation versus denotation. All words have connotation attached to them. We just try and use that. Okay, so let's look at this poem, She Walks in Beauty, by Lord Byron. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meets in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy days denies. One shade the more, one gray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace, which waves in every raven tress of softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling's place. And on that cheek and over that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days and goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. Interestingly enough, this one happens to be sort of a love poem. But so he's obviously describing somebody that's beautiful. She walks in beauty, like she's beautiful, nameless grace. He talks about her hair, her face, her expression. But he does more than just talk about her beauty. So we're talking word choice affect the emotional impact. Okay, sorry. Sometimes I forget very quickly what we're actually doing. So we have words like mellowed and tender and grace and things like that. So the emotional impact, I find this poem very calming. It's sweet, it's nice. And so his word choice affects that. It affects the overall tone of the poem. He uses simple words to describe this simple beauty that is not only outside but within. And then he does use, the connotation versus denotation that he's using. So again, we have grace, that's a word that we associate with a really positive connotation. Same with tender, eloquent, soft, and calm. So he's using all these really positive connotative words in this description of this person. And it's just, you can tell that there is love there. So that's all I have to say about that one. Okay, Ozymandias. I don't know if any of you are old enough to, but Breaking Bad, this actually comes up. So I giggled when I was thinking about that earlier today. But this is
I watched every episode.
Nice. I plan to rewatch it soon, but Ozymandias comes up. So there you go. So, what is the question? How does the structure affect the overall meaning and emotional impact of the poem? I actually find this question super confusing because I don't really know what they're trying to ask when they say the structure. Because when I think of the structure of a poem, I'm thinking of it how it's actually constructed. But I pulled up the sample answer and it doesn't even like touch on that at all. So you don't have to do this question because it's actually not what it asks. Like if I click the submit button, it actually talks about theme, like not really like the meaning and emotional impact of the poem. I thought that was very strange. Anyway, I'm just going to read this to you because it's fun. I met a traveler from an antique land, an old place, who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor welled those passions red, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. So this is very visual, right? So there's just this like traveler coming along so we have, another thing is there are 3 narrators. So you have the initial person who then is told by the traveler about this sculpture that he saw. And then the third from what's on the pedestal is our third person, who is Ozymandias. So my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So again, I truly don't know what this question is asking of you, just especially based off of the sample answer. But basically, like what the point is that, so there was this king, he calls himself the King of Kings, but nothing is left. Everything is just left in ruins. And he uses the word, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. So he wants you to look at what he's done and be sad about it, but he is also ironically kind of talking about his own despair, because nothing is left. Everything that he built, his kingdom is gone. It fell. So yeah, it doesn't survive. And really the point of that poem and what it's trying to get is, you can build the greatest kingdom in the world, you can set statues in stone, but nothing lasts forever, and you can be conquered and everything you work for can be taken from you. Really dark. Everybody falls, and you can be King of Kings, but you will die and your kingdom will fall. So that's that one. I just think it's a cool poem. Okay. And then we have Ode to a Grecian Urn. So this has definitely, there's a word allusions. And so an allusion to something is, it's usually like literary or biblical when we think of allusions. So an allusion, not illusion, not with an I, allusion with an A. So an allusion is a reference to something that is considered like well-known, something that people would generally understand, they would be familiar with. So that's why like biblical allusions are really common. It'll just be like, we're talking about something else, and then I'm going to make a comparison or bring up this thing. So the only reason I bring that up is I know that I have had some allusions to Ode on a Grecian Urn come up recently, and I don't remember what they're. Anyway. Okay, so Keats addresses his poem to the urn itself using the poetic technique of apostrophe. How does this technique help illustrate the immortality of art? So he is talking to the urn. Okay, so think about that, and think about if we talk to this object, how are we thinking about how art is more immortal, whereas humans are mortal, right? So it kind of ties back into that like idea of leaving something behind, having some kind of legacy. Let's see. Not too bad. I will read this one to you, and then we'll do a quick review of our unit activity, and then we'll wrap it up. All right, so Ode on a Grecian Urn by John Keats. Thou still and ravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, Sylvian historian who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme, what leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape of deities or mortals or both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maiden's loth? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? An urn is like a vase. Just think of it as a vase, or a vase for not being fancy. But usually an urn, like we think of, has ashes inside of it. But Grecian urns are actually known for having these like beautiful, really detailed scenes painted on them. And so that's what he's talking about. He's talking about like this specific urn and what's painted on it. So what men are gods are these, what maidens loth, like he's asking, like talking about what is on this scene. And so think about that too when we're thinking about this immortality of art aspect. What pipes and trembles, what wild ecstasy. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore ye soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared. Pipe to the spirit, ditties of no tone. Fair youth beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor never can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss. Though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve. She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss, for ever wilt thou love, and she be fair. So you can kind of start to see where this idea of immortality is really coming in these lines 15 through 20, right? So it's this idea like the leaves will never be bare, but you'll also never be able to kiss this girl because you're frozen, right? You're just a painting on this urn. And so although like everything is beautiful and carefree and lovely in this painting, it can't, like, that's it. That's all that there is. It's just the end when that wraps up. So. Happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves. Boughs is like another word for branch. That cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. And happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs forever new. So again, if there's like a picture of somebody playing a flute or a pipe or something, they're frozen there forever. More happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? O what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadest thou that heifer lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of this folk this pious morn? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can ever return. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with bredge of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou, silent form, dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity. Cold pastoral, when old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain, amidst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. So, again, going back to the question. So how does this help illustrate the immortality of art, right? Like he is talking to the urn about what's on the urn and just really bringing up the idea of like, everyone's going to be forever young. The trees are never going to die. And so that's really what he's getting at with that. So yeah, hopefully you're able to give some examples. Like I said, 15 to 20, those lines really bring it up. And then just say, like, he's talking about these frozen moments in time, immortality, art versus life. Cool. All right. Hopefully that was at least mildly helpful. Okay. So if you have more specific questions, one on any of the tutorials, please ask. You can send me email, like Nick brought up. You can send me messages on Hangouts, whatever. If you need something, just let me know. I am more than happy to help. Just so you know, like I said, I'll be off tomorrow, and then Monday is a holiday. But next week I'll be available, and then I'll have open session hopefully on Friday for you. Yeah.
Dang it! Right when I had the question, my mind went totally blank. Well, like you said, like the Google Hangouts or something, I'm up like 24 hours a day. No, but also, what are like reasonable? Like I know, like I think past 3 or like 4, I can't remember. Like teachers log off, but like, what are reasonable hours to like email you?
So yeah, let me go over this, and then I'll just stop the recording to kind of talk about like my office hours, and I'll answer those questions. I just really want to get through talking about the unit activity real fast, okay?
Oh, sorry.
I definitely come back to that because that's a really good question. But yeah, I'm just going to go over this real fast. Okay, so I feel like these poems, I totally got this activity from the one that was originally there. I just made it a little bit easier. All of the poems are linked, so you can just get them. These all come up throughout the tutorial, so you are asked to read about them and you are given information about them. But yeah, so those are all available for you to click on to get versions of to look at. So if you want to use one of these poems, use them. If not, try and, read through it first, do what this says. If you have any questions about whether or not it's an appropriate poem to use, ask, but I recommend sticking with examples. So then you're just going to answer this question in complete sentences. Don't just say, because I wanted to or anything. Like, which poem did you choose and why? I would ask that you read all of them before you choose one, especially because you're going to have this idea of what you're expected to do. Okay, so you're going to choose a poem, and then you're going to read it a few times because you have some questions that you need to answer. I definitely recommend trying to use evidence where you're able to, which is just like pulling bits of the poem out that demonstrate what you're trying to say here. So what is the poem's theme or central idea? Like, what is the poem about? Question 1. How does the author use figurative language or other poetic devices? So, like, what elements of figurative language are visible in the poem? What other poetic devices are provided? So that's definitely a really good spot to pull some examples, just to like show, hey, and then note what figurative language or poetic device is being used. And then what effect does the figurative language have on the poem? So usually figurative language is used to make it more interesting, just to like add different elements. There's rhetorical devices, there's a whole bunch of stuff. But so what is that? What's the effect on the poem? How would you describe the tone of the poem? So you can think of it as informal or formal, but also like, how does that poem kind of make you feel? So you can think about that, like, is it a sad thing? Like, is it a negative tone? Is it a positive tone? Like, what's going on there? And then how would you describe the structure or organization of the poem? Like, how is it set up? Is it really short? Is it long? Is it broken into multiple stanzas? Are the stanzas long and then short and then long? Like, how how is it set up? I'm not really talking about necessarily like the rhyme scheme of the poem, like is it A, B, C, D, C, D? If you want to talk about that, that's cool. But just overall, like what is the structure and how does that work out? And then it's a little bit of analysis. So we're in English 12B. I do want some essays. So these are really the key points. Hopefully you're like familiar with looking for outside sources. If not, it's kind of okay. But it is good if you can try and find some sources. But basically, I want to know what your interpretation of the poem is. All those questions will help you kind of come up with that. Textual evidence, hey, you've already probably got some because you've got this figurative language, right? An analysis of specific elements. Again, you talked about some of that. So I think this is asking for a pretty long essay. You know, I'm not necessarily going to care about every single one of these points being hit. Probably revise this at some point, but my big ones are you should definitely have examples from the poem to try and get like what you're trying to say about it across. Like if you're talking about the figurative language, show me the figurative language. And then again, we're in English class, so definitely use that spell check option. If you want me to look over your essays before you turn them in, send them my way. You have a couple of resources here. But I mean, if this ends up being a 3-paragraph essay, that's totally fine. All I want out of your writing is to know that you understand what you're talking about. Okay, so that's really what I'm looking for there. If you have more questions, please let me know. I'll probably talk about this again a little bit next week, especially if some questions come up. But yeah, that's really all that I have to say about that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Again, please let me know if you have any questions, but that is that.